Well, I want to start by reminding us what happened immediately before our reading today, because we're picking up today right where we left off last week. Last week, our text began with Jesus hearing the news that his cousin, John the Baptist, was beheaded by King Herod's orders. And Jesus tried to get away to a deserted place to be by himself, presumably to grieve, but the crowds followed him. And instead of caring for himself, he had compassion for the crowd, and he healed them. And then Jesus miraculously turned 5 loaves and 2 fish into a feast for 5,000, well, like 10,000 people if women are people. What a day. Can you imagine how the disciples must be feeling? Shock? Awe? Joy? Maybe they were confused, dumbfounded, baffled, befuddled, flummoxed, flabbergasted. I love that word. Flabbergasted. Excited. I mean, that was a pretty memorable day. Maybe the biggest day of their lives up till now. And that's where we start. So Jesus sends them on ahead into the boat to the other side so that he can be alone to think, to relax, to grieve, to pray. A storm comes up. Their excitement after such an amazing day quickly must have turned to fear. I wonder, too, do you think that they thought that Jesus had abandoned them? I mean, how often do we get into the storms of life and wonder if we have been abandoned? Abandoned by God, abandoned by Jesus, abandoned by loved ones, abandoned by everyone. But they were not abandoned. Jesus comes walking towards them on the water. And instead of rejoicing, like you might have thought, instead of rejoicing, they are terrified. They think they've seen a ghost. But Jesus says, "Don't be afraid, it's me." When Peter realizes that it really is Jesus, he wants to be near him. And Jesus says, "Come." And Peter comes. Now, we could question the wisdom of getting out of a perfectly good boat, even if it is tossed in a storm. I mean, what made Peter think that he could walk on water like Jesus? Was it faith? Courage? Confidence? Stupidity? I mean, maybe he wasn't thinking at all. He just wanted to be near Jesus. And it worked, until it didn't. I was reminded of Wile E. Coyote. I have this picture in my head as he runs off a cliff chasing the roadrunner, and he stays airborne for a few seconds, and the moment he realizes he's not on solid ground, he falls. The moment Peter takes his eyes off Jesus and realizes he's in a stormy sea with the wind whipping all around him, he starts to sink. Peter, the rock, sunk like a stone. The wind was against them, Matthew tells us. We know what it's like to have the wind against us in a storm. I mean, we Floridians understand wind because of all the hurricanes that we've experienced. But these days, I'm feeling battered by metaphorical storms. I feel like there's so much going against us right now. and storms are brewing. For instance, I thought that this was a free country where everyone can pursue happiness. But the storms of our autocracy and narrow-mindedness are bombarding freedom at every turn. Banning books in a democratic society? Women not able to make decisions over their own health care, even when their lives are threatened? Immigrants not being treated with kindness, as the Bible tells us, but treated instead like villains and enemies. The world feels very stormy, and I can't catch my breath. The stormy waters of racism and violence are heaving and tossing us around. The state wants to teach that slavery was like an apprenticeship. And apparently, drag queens are more dangerous than AR-15s because now gun manufacturers are making JR-15s for our children, for little hands, and small arms, for our children. The same children who are prohibited from reading A Wrinkle in Time or attending story hour if a drag queen is reading the story. I didn't realize that sequins and eyeliner were more dangerous than bullets. It's stormy indeed, and it has been stormy for a while. It was not so long ago that the world witnessed the murder of George Floyd, and we have not been the same since. Racism is not new. Violence is not new. The lynching of black bodies has been going on for centuries. Injustice is not new. But our attention has been refocused by videos and recordings. And once we see injustice, we cannot unsee it. The storms of injustice swirl all around us. But Jesus says, come. Until we step out of the safety of our boat and into the stormy waters to fight for justice. Jesus reaches out his hand and saves Peter from drowning. Jesus says, "You of little faith, why did you doubt?" So is Jesus scolding Peter? Like, did he say, "You of little faith, why did you doubt? If you just had more faith, you would not have sunk"? I mean, that seems harsh. Because it seems to me that Peter had a boat full of faith, pun intended. It takes faith to step out of the boat in the first place, doesn't it? Surely Jesus recognized Peter's faith. We must be interpreting it wrong. Instead of scolding Peter, Jesus must be encouraging Peter, like a parent teaching their child to ride a bike. Look, Peter, you did it. No hands. Just keep your eyes on me and you won't sink. Jesus calls us to come too. Jesus calls us to step out of the boat into unknown waters. Some traditional interpretations have said that the boat is a metaphor for the church. Jesus sent the disciples into the boat. Jesus sent the disciples to be the church. And we can all see that the church has been tossed about on stormy waters. Low attendance, waning financial statements, praise bands and drums to liven up a worship service. It's almost like thunder and lightning. Jesus calls us to come. Step out of the boat. Step out of the old church boat and walk on water towards something new. Walk on water towards Jesus, into the future, to something new. Jesus says, come. And if we keep our eyes on Jesus, we will not drown. Keep our eyes on Jesus while he shows us compassion and brings healing. Keep our eyes on Jesus as he stands against the oppressive powers of the domination system of the Roman Empire. Keep our eyes on Jesus as he steps into the storm of injustice to free the oppressed. Keep our eyes on Jesus as he feeds a multitude. We are surrounded by storms, and the wind is against us. But Jesus is reaching out his hand, and we are buoyed by the love of God. So, disciples, are you ready? Are you ready to get your feet wet? Let's step out of the boat. Amen.